Depression, downturn and the crisis, financial crisis. I think we're going to see an even bigger one this time, where you go to these extremes on the market and then you come down. I'm calling for an 80% bear market from the peaks. It doesn't have to be 80. It could be 70. It could be, something a little less than that. But I think 80 is a pretty good number. We haven't seen anything of that magnitude since the Great Depression, since the 29 crash. But we're in these excesses. Leverage is so far off the rails. We had tremendously high leverage in 2008-9, which gave us the Great Recession and the huge financial crisis back then. We have debt way beyond those levels now. Global debt's at 330 trillion. We have derivatives that are so much larger than, greater than what we saw back then. So derivatives are leverage on the markets. Debt is leverage on the system, on the economy. I think both of those things, when we turn down, will exacerbate the downturn and make it greater. So the fact that it's many, many degrees greater in leverage than 2009 simply means, to me, the likelihood is that we're going to see a bigger downturn, a bigger financial crisis than we had then. Different. I mean, we don't have the subprime issue that we had then. The banks in the U.S. aren't leveraged to the extent they were then, much less. I mean, we've really taken that leverage out of there. But around the world, this is a global bust, and around the world, there is just so much more leverage. And, banks that are fragile and vulnerable. So it may not start here. It may start elsewhere this time. But it will take in the whole globe, I think. Based on this idea that we don't want inflation. We don't want to move too soon and then have to be right back here in, a few months fighting inflation again and in a more difficult situation. So I think that's mostly what's driving him. I personally think they're late, as the Fed always is in each cycle, because of the leads and lags. They wait, they're looking at backward-looking data, and by definition, waiting for that to give them the signal. That means they're going to be late because of the lagged policy of 6 to 9 months at least. So that means you're almost guaranteed to be late by at least 6 or 8 or 10 months. And so I think they should be cutting here and beginning to rebuild the balance sheet, as crazy as it is at the levels we're at. However, I can't fault him yet, because basically so far they've been right to sit on their hands. So, but that is what I think could be part of the bust, is they're going to be even later than they would otherwise have been, because of what happened because of the criticism they got in 2022, and because of what happened in response to 2020, and having to put so much money in. He's stated over and over, I'm not going back there. We are not going to repeat the mistakes of the past and go to zero interest rate policy. I chuckle because he doesn't realize, if I'm right, they will be back there, not by choice, but because there won't be a choice. They'll be pumping in money to save the system because it'll be in free fall. What will get money up to the levels I'm talking is a banking system around the world that's failing, that's in free fall, bigger than what we saw in 2008-9. And they can talk all they want right now about what they want policy to be and what they plan to do. When you're faced with a crisis that's right in front of you, that is bigger than anything the world has ever seen, you are not worried about what does our policy lead to down the road, inflation 3 years down the road. You're worried about the here and now. And they're going to start slow. And that's where I think this, fighting the last war comes in. They're going to start slow. Slow now, meaning they should be cutting, but they're not yet. Slow later, meaning, we now need to turn things around. We need to ease, but they're not going to ease fast enough. So they'll, and I'm talking about money more than rates. You'll see them say, okay, we'll do $1 trillion. but we're not going back to 5 trillion, and we're not doing what we did in 2020. And a trillion may be 4 trillion too little at that point in time. They wait a month or more, and things are still in free fall. So they say, we got to do more. We hate to do this, but we don't have a choice. What else? We don't have any other tool. So they do another 2 or 3 trillion or whatever. And that doesn't do it. It will take them several steps, several months to get to 20 trillion, to a level, or to any whatever level it turns out to be, that is the right size policy that finally stabilizes things and gets things turning the other way. So everybody thinks it's a matter of, when the Fed eases, you stop the cycle, you stop the downturn, or stop the free fall. No, it's not only turning the policy around, it's right sizing the policy. And because of what's happened in the last 15 years, 2008, 9, up through 2020, it means they're going to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. They're fighting the last war. They will get to it because they won't have a choice. And I'm not in the Austrian camp or the Peter Schiff camp that this is the big one. We go into a bigger depression. This is a bust. And it's a bust because they do have the printing press. It's a bust because we will have, I think, deflation in this bust, certainly low inflation and maybe deflation in this bust, which means they'll have the wherewithal to print money, because the inflation in response to that money is at least a couple of years away, maybe 3 years away, in terms of real inflation, big inflation. Because if you're coming out of deflation, your first year you might go to minor, low-level inflation. Second year might be mid-single digit or a little higher inflation. By the third year, you're in double-digit inflation and you got problems. But when you're in the midst of a free-falling financial system and an economy that's tanking, you're not going to be worried about inflation. You're going to be fighting that war. But for a while, they'll not see that that's what they're facing.